Well, hello xenographers everywhere, and welcome to another episode. One quality I like very much in a lens is the ability to produce a bit of swirly bokeh in the back of a shot. It's become quite a popular effect of late, and while it's not everyone's cup of tea, it's an effect that's sought after by many photographers. So in this episode, we're going to look at two lenses that can produce this effect and explain the techniques you need to use to make them do it. We're also going to look at a simple modification you can make to one of those lenses to give you some very crazy swirl indeed. So let's start with perhaps the best known swirler, and that's the Helios 44. When the conditions are right, the swirl this lens makes is quite pronounced. There are differences in the 8 or so versions of this lens though. Later versions are sharper with better coatings, but they're less good at creating the swirl, so for best results, stick to the Helios 44 or the 44-2. The swirl effect comes from what's usually considered a technical flaw in the lens that causes bokeh bubbles towards the edge of the frame to become elliptical. Under the right conditions, these ellipses merge into each other to give the impression of a vortex. Most modern lenses don't exhibit this tendency because lens manufacturers have spent years trying to iron it out, and they've pretty much succeeded in that. For my money though, I'll take the flaw every time. The Helios doesn't swirl all the time. Most of the time, blur is very soft and very smooth. The effect works best with natural backgrounds with random and varied shapes, foliage for example, or a pebble beach. It doesn't work well at all with man-made backgrounds which usually have angular shapes and straight lines. It's also best to shoot wide open. All of these images are shot at f2. The effect's dependent on distance as well, both from subject to camera and subject to background. I've found it works best when you're about 3 or 4 feet from your subject and the background's about 6 to 8 feet from the subject. Point light sources in the background will help the swirl to appear too. It's an unpredictable effect, and sometimes it's quite subtle, so you'll need to experiment a bit to find the swirly sweet spot. Persevere though, and eventually the swirl will appear. I find swirl to be a great framing device. It concentrates attention on the subject and lends a very interesting aesthetic to the background. It gives a sense of movement and dynamism to a shot, and I think swirly shots are far more interesting than the technically perfect but rather clinical images that modern lenses make. In my opinion, it works really well for portraits too. The Helios is a classic swirler. If you like a bit of the swirly stuff, with one of these, you just can't go wrong. Another well-known swirler is the Leica Summitar 50mm. This lens has lovely bokeh, and again, under the right conditions, that bokeh starts to get swirly. The same approach used with the Helios applies to this lens too. Natural backgrounds, maximum aperture, and the right lens to subject and subject to background distances. I really like the swirl from this lens. It's got a bit of sparkle, it's got a bit of magic, and perhaps because it has a longer minimum focus distance to the Helios, it seems to emerge a bit more readily. The swirl itself is similar to the Helios. Elliptical bubbles and shapes in the outer portions of the image merge together to create the effect, and what can technically be seen as a flaw becomes, to my eyes at least, a definite plus point. But although it's similar to the Helios, there are differences too. Colours from the Leica are warmer than the Helios. That might be a result of different coatings and glass composition. The Leica's more contrasty too, perhaps for the same reason. To my eyes, images from the Leica have a bit more sparkle, and perhaps that's not surprising. It's a more modern lens, and it's much more expensive too. both these lenses make some very nice swirl indeed, and that's what's important here. If you like a bit of the swirly stuff, both these lenses will come up with the goods. So, the Helios certainly has some swirly background blur, but a simple hack can take it from swirly to downright bizarre. All we need to do is reverse the front element, and on this lens that's very simple to do. Ideally you need a lens spanner for this job, although a small screwdriver will do in a pinch. The front retaining ring has two cutouts into which the blades of the lens spanner will fit. Just loosen the ring, take it out, and the front element can be removed. Turn it over and put it back with the concave side facing outwards. Replace the retaining ring and you're done. Now you've got something that can make images like this. Point light sources change their character completely. They're no longer elliptical bubbles. At maximum aperture, each one has trails pointing away from the centre, and the image looks sparkly and magical. At maximum aperture, the image is very soft, but the more you stop down, the sharper it becomes. At minimum aperture, the image is pretty sharp, and point light sources acquire tails and seem to stream towards the centre, giving an impression of movement. Sometimes a vortex appears in the central area too. I certainly wouldn't recommend overusing this effect, and it won't work for every shot, but there are occasions, as with any unusual effect, where it really comes into its own. Sometimes it really shines. I really like this effect, and although I don't use it too often, I do use it. It makes an ordinary mundane image very exciting to look at. It really adds something, and it makes any shot you use it on very distinctive indeed. It's a very easy mod to do, and it's reversible. And because the Helios is so commonplace and so cheap, I usually keep one with the front element permanently reversed. So there we are, two great little lenses and one great little hack that will give you the swirly stuff in abundance. So that's it from me for now. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope you've found it useful. Don't forget to like and subscribe before you go, and I will see you next time for some more Zenography. As ever, thanks for watching.